Welcome, everyone. This is Elizabeth Wood for New Earth Conversations, and I have a very special guest, my friend Victoria Moore. And she is an incredible mystic and the emissary of the Nilotic Meridian, a master meditator, among many things. And she has a really beautiful, refined field of royalty, of Arcturian light, and it's impossible for me to truly explain to you how wonderful it is to have Victoria on. It's such an honor. Thank you for joining us today, Victoria. I so appreciate it.
That's very touching. Thank you for that very, very sweet introduction. And I'm delighted to be here, and I've really been looking forward to our conversation. And I'm so sorry, everybody, about having had to miss our initial foray on July 7th. But when you live in paradise, sometimes you have to put up with some of the conveniences of life in the Western world. They're not here. So we have things happen where we lose electricity, or the water's been turned off because they're fixing the pipe to the river, and, various things like that. Things you wouldn't really experience in the U.S., at least not at this point. So we were out of power for like 24 hours. So I'm really glad we can do this makeup today. Yeah, lost most everything in my freezer.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, oh no. Yeah, well, you know what ended up happening, Victoria, is we ended up having the most beautiful impromptu call where I just checked in with everybody, and this deep, beautiful sharing check-in ended up having more power than I could have ever imagined. So it all flowed the way that it needed to. Perfect, and if you've all missed that call for any reason, I think you'd all enjoy it. It was very powerful. We had a lot of really great topics on Unwrap, just naturally, to the point where everyone's asked to do it regularly so that they can feel that sense of community and connection. So we will be doing that. And that's free, of course, to listen to on the New Earth Conversation page. But nonetheless, let us begin on our topic. Fascinating one. And as an anthropologist, I adore the concepts behind ancient Egyptian culture. But there is something even deeper beyond that people are only just starting to realize, sort of a suppressed archaeology, that in some experiences, such as yours, Victoria, is part of your incredible history. And the ancient history behind what came before Egypt is something I'd like to unwrap with you today, and then how it led into what we know of as Egypt. But there was a culture that came before Egypt that created the monoliths, who brought the technologies from the stars. And of course, not all of them were human. So let's unwrap that a little bit. Yeah, mostly not. Let's start there, and then we'll uncover the power of the Nilotic Meridian, which runs through this beautiful place. What would you like to tell everybody about that history, that prehistory before the known Egypt?
Right. Well, currently, it's very interesting the way this is happening, because you and I talked about this, Elizabeth. It's a tough job being an academic, because you learn exactly what the body of knowledge is at the time you're studying. And if you keep on top of it, you kind of keep learning new things. But when you learn things that totally discount everything you've been teaching, or everything you've been lecturing on, or everything you've been writing about for years and years, sometimes there's a little resistance, right? And
Certainly.
that is the case, very much the case in Egypt at this point in time, because as the equipment with which things can be dated is continually becoming more and more accurate, and I'm sure it's nowhere near as accurate as it's going to get in our lifetime. But new things are being discovered all the time about even, let's say, Egypt that goes back 6 or 7, 8,000 years, maybe 10,000 years at the most. Recently, sometime in the last 6 months, I think, there was a Facebook post that a friend of mine who was on the trip that I led last year, she posted this piece about recent excavations at the Great Pyramid, where they were using new kinds of technology to show that there are actually other chambers and other walkways, and but it's dicey because actually digging in to find those things, you run the risk of maybe bringing destruction to what you've already got. So, but they've proved with laser photography and a kind of, I think it's a sonic device, that there are other rooms, which is, of course, what seers have seen about the Great Pyramid for years. Or you mentioned, Elizabeth, the monoliths. So I consider the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx both in that category. And the Sphinx as well. Probably, well, people are divided in what they think, but it's very likely that the head that's on the Sphinx right now was not the original head. It's very likely it was a lion head, a lion face. And then one very narcissistic pharaoh decided it should be his face. Mm-hmm. And of course, the debate rages eternally about how old it is because, again, dating science keeps becoming more accurate, and so there's more and more proof with, like, you can see watermarks that show that that the pyramid was in place long before what has been up to now accepted as its age. I mean, I can't even quote you what is currently considering the age of the Great Pyramid. I mean, or the Sphinx. Sorry, the Sphinx. And I actually had an experience with the Sphinx, which I can share at some point, where I got a real insight to it. When did that happen? That happened last year, I think. Yeah, it happened last year. But there have been my favorite things to read about Egypt are these a couple of books, both that bring in information that proves that there was a high culture there in another cycle, a previous cycle to this one. So we're talking, maybe 100,000 years ago, or 150 or 200,000 years ago, or I don't know. But when I'm there, as I write about it, I say that it's so fascinating because you are directly experiencing multidimensionality. There's modern Egypt, and then there's the ancient Egypt of the current sites that you will find there. And then there is something much more ancient than that. And it's all there simultaneously. There's one temple in particular where it's just like in Europe, with the great cathedrals. They were always built on top of sites where goddess worship had happened. And of course, they're on the nodes of various ley lines. Well, in ancient Egypt, a lot of the current temples are very recent. They're from like 4,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. They were built by the Ptolemies, who were Romans, who had conquered Egypt. But they were built on top of older ones. And you can actually see in some of the temples, there's been excavation done that shows there's like the top of a pillar that protrudes or it just meets the floor. It just turned out there was some damage to this in this one temple to the floor. And when they were trying to repair it, they found the top of another pillar. In other words, there's a whole huge temple underneath the existing temple, but they can't excavate it without tearing down the current temple. So, at this point in time, at least, that's kind of the situation. You also have like the temple of Isis at Philae. What happened is it was actually located at a different spot, the whole island, and the temple on that island. But when they put in the Aswan Dam, the waters that changed the directions that the waters were flowing. So, in order to save that beautiful temple, they deconstructed the whole thing and then reconstructed it on a new site, on a new island. Everything. That was quite a project. So that's, and even then, those temples aren't ancient, but many of them carry the vibration of the really ancient stuff. And so these couple of books that I've read, one of them is a really fascinating book that, my old teacher Rama actually recommended when I first became a student. It's called Initiation by a woman named Elizabeth H. And she, in the book, she recounts a past life that she had. And when you read the details of it, you realize this was way long ago, much further back than 8,000 or 10,000 years. And it's fascinating because the story is really cool. She was born like right around the turn of the century in the 20th century, and she was born in Hungary, and she, from the time she was a little child, she had these memories of being in another place. Like, she remembered desert and she remembered ocean, and nothing like this, this mountainous place where she was living then. And she never felt like she belonged to her family, even though she loved them very much. They weren't her real family, right? And she had these insights for many years, but when Hungary was invaded in World War II, she had a huge past life recall of what she went through is in her life in very ancient Egypt, and what her training. She recounts not only the story. She was the pharaoh's daughter, and her uncle was Ptah-hotep, the head priest. And they talk about their galactic origins. And it's not a, inferior, superior thing, not at all. Meaning that they feel superior and others are inferior, which very much plays out in a lot of the mythologies when people talk about off-world beings being on this planet. A lot of nonsense about that. We talked about that, didn't we, around Christmas time, right? The Anunnaki were like totally neutral. They were here doing a job. They were not here creating slaves. But anyway, so in this book, you get an insight into the consciousness of these beings, but not only that, what she goes through in preparation for her initiation. And I've read this book multiple times, but only the last 2 times that I've read it did I really engage with some of the most interesting stuff, which is these couple of chapters where she recounts the teachings that she's received, that she is receiving from Ptah Hotep to prepare her for her initiation. And it's got everything. I mean, they talk about the formless and form and how it works from a standpoint of vibration, about, polarity, really, of unconscious and conscious, sacred geometry, astrology, numerology. I mean, it includes all this information from thousands of years ago, which is, of course, being slowly remembered by people now. And it just blew my mind. There was so much wisdom in that. And of course, the first couple of times I read the book, I was more interested in her story and what happened to her and how things happened. And I think I really kind of just breezed through all the true teachings. So I would highly recommend anybody interested in getting a sense of what very ancient Egypt had, that you look at that book. There's another book by a woman named Joan E. Grant called Winged Pharaoh, and she was an author who basically wrote from her past life memories. And again, that book, it's a beautiful book, but it really, it also points to a much more ancient culture that is very much influenced by what I would call universal teachings, universal truth teachings, meaning information about how consciousness and form is created from consciousness, and how critical being in a state of consciousness that we at this point would probably call Christ consciousness, a state of treating everybody else from a place of being a soul and in your heart, and all the things that humanity is really struggling with right now, getting over the me first, me only, fighting, all that kind of stuff. So these teachings that came through from beings from other planets and systems that are millions of years older, millions of years more evolved than this planet is right now, they show up in these, when people have a really, they have that gift of that kind of memory of their past. And when I've been there, I have actually felt that information coming through, because it's like, in Tibet, they have that, they talk about termas, where, knowledge, information, wisdom is stored in places or things or beings. And it's like each of those sacred sites in Egypt is a terma of vast cosmic wisdom. And then, of course, the other thing that's fascinating is that the whole pantheon of the Egyptian gods and goddesses are all like, bird heads or lion heads, or the Hathor beings look like aliens with wigs on. That's what my friend Emil, the Egyptologist I work with, calls them. And and since that time, I've been introduced to the fact that there are beings that they have that, what do they call it, the 5-star body, 2 legs, 2 arms, a torso, but then heads, a bird head or a lion head, and so when you look at there's there's the crocodile god, Sobek. I mean, all of this whole pantheon are, on the one hand, they're a rendition of a band of consciousness, a particular luminosity, a particular quality. But I do think they derive their origins from the memories, the ancient memories of interacting with beings from other worlds, other planets. And I know there is a lot of information about Egypt being like the last bastion of the knowledge from Atlantis. And, I don't know. That's very, very likely true. I don't have a memory of that. I tend to resonate more with the Lemurian ancient consciousness. But that makes a lot of sense. And, I think there is or Egypt itself was existing and flowering at the same time as maybe a parallel state. I don't know. Some of that it's a mystery. I don't mind having mystery in my life. So, yeah. I don't know. I could go on and on. I'm not going to run on forever.
You're right.
Am I making sense? I don't know.
Oh, very well. Yes, and I wanted to harken back to your talking about how our technology now is getting better so we can actually see under the sand, and I know that they did find a chamber underneath the feet of the Sphinx. Yep. And
the pause. The pause.
Yes, the pause. Sorry, Sphinx. The energy of the Sphinx is fantastic, especially when you go into meditation and do a little bit of imagining yourself being there. You can do some basic remote viewing like that and really spend time with that energy. And it's often, when I've ever done that, brought me to tears because of its incredible formless power. And many very famous geologists have pointed out that the Sphinx geologically has been there far, far longer, and we're talking about a golden age about 200,000 years ago. And I feel that the monolith, the monolithic city that was there, which ancient Egypt was built upon, is older than Atlantis. And that the Atlanteans came to build upon that.
I feel that way too. I just didn't want to put that out there, but I agree. I feel that this was because the Atlantis information doesn't really point to a lot of interaction with extraterrestrial beings, but the Egyptian history does. So I actually feel that way too. Yeah. Well, okay, so I will tell you my Sphinx experience.
Yeah, go ahead. Good. I can't wait. Yeah, it's a good time.
No, you go. Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'll just say one thing. When I think that actually the head of the Sphinx was a lion head myself. And the reason I think that is that I had an experience at one point, and maybe it was actually not in the last year. I can't even remember when it was, but I was doing some work with a friend of mine who is the most out there person I know. Her lineage and her information is it's unique and it's different, and yet she feels very, very authentic. I mean, I know it's accurate, and so I've occasionally done work with her over the years. I'll team up with her from time to time, and we were doing a piece of work at one point, and we were way out in the beyond, and she said, "Okay, so we're going to come back through the eyes of the Sphinx. Which side do you want, left or right?" I said, "I'll come in on the left side." And so we brought our attention back here, coming through the eyes of the Sphinx. And what happened, see if I can remember exactly how it happened. I actually recounted this on a recording. And so I might be more accurate on that recording. But what I remember is that after we came back, I had this moment where I was shown that there are sphinxes, lion-headed sphinx. Oh, I knew from something I'd heard and watched on Gaia TV that there was, that I think, I forget his name, but somebody had actually located and had pictures of a half-man, half-lion head that you can see on Mars. I think it's Mars. And so I'd heard that information. And so what happened is I came through, and then I was right there at the pause of the Sphinx, and I was shown that there are sphinxes all over the galaxy. And most of them have lion heads, unlike our Sphinx. And they're all connected. And they are all in communication with each other. They're all like, it's like, I guess you could say it's like vortex exchanges or something. But it was it's just kind of, I don't know. Can you see it while I'm describing it?
I do, and I was wondering what was going on because the energy moves up and out of the galaxy. I mean, it's really incredible. Yeah. And that doesn't surprise me. It really resonates with me. I have talked to great cat people.
Right, you were going to say that. I know, yeah.
They love to bounce around. They love to go to different places. And they do so with this wonderful, joyful, royal energy. And they show up places and they just create and they share and then they leave. But I really resonate with that. I can totally imagine that. Why wouldn't a Sphinx be built on this beautiful planet? They came and they were beloved. They were honored. Well, and they still are.
Yeah. Well, my understanding was, and again, I can't prove this, but this does feel like truth to me. It resonates as truth to me. That they are like the creator, you could call them the creator gods or the builders. I've heard them referred to as the ancient builder race. That's what they do. They go and get cultures started, and this Sphinx is kind of like, they leave their calling card. And so that's why there are sphinxes all over. And that's what I got. I had this experience of being within this our Sphinx and connecting with all the others all over the galaxies. Galaxies, plural.
So cool.
Yeah. So Egypt is just this amazing place of mystery and magic. And the people who live there now, I mean, they're very, very heart-centered. I know they've had struggles. I mean, the Middle East has its share of struggles, mostly because of it's most of it all over the Middle East, I would say, is a result of the excesses of colonization. And, us, the West, telling them, what country they are, what their boundaries are, and these tribal people didn't mean anything to them. So there has been a lot of strife and struggle there, but the Egyptian people are really heart-centered. And so it's this really cool thing because you're in this current, modern metropolis, and yet you can feel what's underneath it whenever you're there. You're in two places at once, at least. And I think it has had an effect on the people of Egypt because they are particularly heart-centered, much more so than other parts of the world. That's all I'll say. Yeah.
Certainly.
Yeah.
And this kind of leads us into why Egypt? Why Egypt? Well, there is this incredible energy that runs through that part of the planet that we call the Nilotic Meridian. And it's an energy of transformation. The other night thinking about, when I look at it, it just reminds me of when I'm looking at a person, I see a core of light. And that's what the Melodic Meridian is. It's that Sushumna core of light of the planet. And
right,
it makes
absolutely.
sense that all of the most important things that have happened for humanity have happened along that meridian. All the 12 galactic tribes of energy and beings came to begin this experiment on this planet, and they decided to start their experiment on the Melodic Meridian for a reason, because it's an energy of evolution. It brings through all the 12 dimensions and source constantly, and it creates really fast, dramatically fast change. I'm sure being there yourself, the time must be very interesting how time passes there. But would you talk about that? What's it like to be on the Melodic Meridian, and why?
Sure.
Why is it so important? And of course, I'd love to hear too. I'm sure we all would, about how you became the emissary of this meridian.
Well, I am an emissary, not the emissary.
Oh,
yeah. I meant to correct you on that. Yeah, I've been drafted among others. And just a sec. Excuse me. Yeah. I didn't realize that initially, but I came to find that out as I've been here on and off since the first time I went to Egypt in 1999. But, yeah, I mean, I remember you and I had a chat between the two of us where you had been seeing, I was telling you my experience of the Nilotic Meridian, and you told me about how you had, I know, you'd been talking to somebody who was up in Turkey, right? Above Egypt.
Yes, some clients along there. Yeah.
Right, and you had seen how creative the energy was and how it was a creation. It was like such, and I that's my experience of it. It's very much a Genesis vibration, the Genesis of life vibration. And my first experience of being on this Nilotic Meridian, and it's named for the Nile River, was from a trip that I took in 1999, and I won't go into detail because I wrote all about it, and it's on Facebook, and it's on my website about my trip in 1999, where my friend Leslie had been told by her guides she had to be in the Great Pyramid at Giza on August 11th, 1999. And she told me about this when I first reconnected with her after not seeing her for 12 years in 1997. And I said, I'll be there. She said, anybody who wants to come to support me, it's going to be hot. It's going to be difficult, but we'll probably spend most of our time inside processing, but we're going to be in the Great Pyramid. And we were. And it was an amazing experience. And we found out later, again, this is perhaps hearsay, I don't know, but apparently a group of beings who would have had a very different kind of agenda, beings you could call the Illuminati or whatever, had plans to be there on August 11th, 1999. And unfortunately, we were there first, and we were there all night long, so they didn't get in there, which feels, when I heard that, it felt like, okay, that's why she was told, you have to be there. And we secured it 2 years in advance, so there was no bumping us out. Anyway, that was my first experience of Egypt and my first experience of being on the Nilotic Meridian, and it was incredibly powerful, and it blew my socks off. That was in August of 99, and then in March of 2000, I ended up coming with Leslie and a group of people on a journey. Oh, actually, Lucia was on that journey too. and several other friends of ours who we had known from our days of being students of Rama's were also there. And Leslie had been a student of Rama's in the early 80s, which is how I'd met her initially. Anyway, we came here to South Africa, and I had no idea I would end up coming home from South Africa, part owner of a piece of land here in the Bladder River Canyon at the base of the Nilotic Meridian. In fact, we didn't even know anything about the Nilotic Meridian other than the fact that we could feel the connection between Egypt and here. And there was an experience, I think, that Leslie had down here where she was doing work for Egypt, but she was down here. We just knew that this was straight down from Egypt. About, I think, a year or two later, we connected with Linda Tucker, and she had just written a book called Children of the Sun Gods, which was about the white lions of Timbavati. And she had been tutored by a Zulu shaman named Credo Mutwa. And he had given her all the information about the Nilotic Meridian that we then, being friends with her and working with her, we helped her raise funds to purchase land, and we were very close with the White Lions, that whole project. We began to learn about this meridian. And it actually extends further south, a little bit further south, to a place where the Phoenix settlement that Mahatma Gandhi established when he was in South Africa. Remember, in Gandhi's, the story of Gandhi, and you've probably seen the movie, he was initially, he became initially more aware of what was going on with the Indian people, or the, their plight here was that they had to carry, it was just like apartheid. It was like what happened to the black people during apartheid. They had to have like papers that they carried with them all the time. They were, treated like slaves. And so he became radicalized, I guess you could say, initially in South Africa. And he had a settlement that he established. And it was at the very, like the southern point of the meridian on the continent. And then this, Africa is like a very large continent, and the meridian that goes up, it's not in the center of Africa, it's more to the eastern part. I gave you a picture of it, right, Elizabeth? So anybody who's has probably seen it. Anyway, it goes straight up, and it's the longest ley line on the planet that is continuous. It's not broken up by water. When it passes beyond the Sphinx and the pyramids at Giza, then it goes over an ocean before it gets up to Turkey. But it's the longest, contiguous meridian on the planet, and it is, to my understanding and certainly to my experience, Gaia's Shishumna. And it's been called the River of Gold, the River of Stars. There has been a huge amount of gold mined from along this meridian, but there's much more left here. And the gold is not just the physical gold, it's the gold of golden consciousness. And it also has a relationship to the Milky Way. And so at the very bottom is the Phoenix settlement, and then you could think of that as like the root of it. And then we have this area, and then, a lot of gold mining has taken place. And then here at the Bladder River Canyon, it's interesting because we have 3 very important sacred sites, all in kind of if you think of a big circle. There's the Bladder River Canyon here. which has ancient historical creation of life energy. Then the Timbavati area, which is the birthplace of the sacred white lions, is about 40 kilometers from us, and essentially on the same, like I think we're we're all pretty much 24 degrees south. And then in the other direction is a site that has become more well known as Adam's Calendar. Actually, the Zulu name for it is Amazi Sikazi, but there are really ancient. It actually. Do you know anything about Adam's Calendar, Elizabeth? Have you heard of it before?
A little bit. We've talked about it in anthropology before, and it is kind of considered the birthplace of what we think of, at least one part of Homo sapiens.
Right. And it's really interesting because when you're on the land, there are some very powerful places, and it has like a stone circle and interesting pieces. But when you're up looking down from an airplane, like a small airplane, you can see it was a landing site. And there's a huge area that it looks like it was like in, a couple 100,000 years ago, a vast, city, whatever, and a landing place for craft, And the last time I was there, I was shown a spot I had never been taken to before that was incredibly powerful. And they have wild horses there, by the way. The story is that there were horses that had been, the army had taken them for World War I, and then they were leftovers, I guess, and they were let loose in that area. But actually, what I was told by somebody who's lived there all his life, they've been there a lot longer than that. And so they're like these sacred guardian beings, just like the white lions are sacred, celestial beings. These wild stallions are guardian beings down at this spot. And my friend and I were there with her friend, who is the one who knows about this spot. He said, look, this is my favorite spot here. And I swear, we were sitting on this ledge, and apparently right below us was an entrance to a cave, but he said he'd taken somebody there once and they almost died, so he decided he's never taking anybody there again because it's dangerous. So we just sat on top and meditated, but it was like a little bit of not really a cliff, but when you looked over, it was just this dense green forested area. And I'd heard stories about how there are beings and cultures inside the planet. And, all this stuff in the past I would have just poo-pooed, but now I kind of feel like, why not? Very possible. And it made sense because the way it was described was that's what in the Tibetan culture they talk about, being able to go to, now I'm spacing on the name of it, well, anyway, sacred.
Is it Argatha, or basically it's Argatha?
Maybe. Okay. No. There's a much more common name. That's I'm
I see, of
right
course.
now.
I don't know. Yeah. Shangri-La, maybe?
Yeah,
I
Shangri-La.
thought that was like on...
Shangri-La.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. So, anyway, so that's why people talk about going to these places you can't find on the planet because they're in the planet. And when I opened my eyes after meditating there and I looked down, I was like, if there's a place, if that's true, this is one of those places. It's like the dense foliage was covering some sort of entryway into one of those vast, beautiful, ancient, fifth-dimensional cultures inside the planet. And that was pretty cool. Oh, and then we turned around, and these 4 magnificent wild stallions were about 10 feet away from us, just gazing at us.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah. So this, living here is very interesting. So this whole area has all of these sacred sites. And I feel like this is kind of the Dantian belly of Gaia's Shishimna, this area. It's very earthy. And like I said, it's a very generative energy. What you had been seeing about the Nilotic Meridian. And then you go further north on the meridian and you've come to right along it, just the Great Zimbabwe Ruins, where apparently there was, so much gold. In fact, were you the one who told me this was the gold that ended up in Egypt? Somebody told me that. Anyway, and you go further north and you come to the the beginning of the Nile at Lake Victoria, right along this meridian. And then the rest, you go up the Nile River and you cross the temple at Philae, which is dedicated to Isis. It goes up through Luxor, where they have the Luxor Temple, Karnak Temple, the Valley of the Kings and Queens, temples at Abydos and Dendara. Very, very, it's interesting how all these places are right along the meridian, and then it goes right up into the Giza Plateau with the Sphinx and the Great Pyramids. And then further up, it's like, it just, energetically further up, you go into these amazing, ancient birthplace of humanity type places like, what is it? Göbekli, what's it called?
Mm-hmm.
Anyway,
yes.
In Turkey. So it's really very powerful, and I have been, I was told at a certain point, I'm here because it's really important to hold this energy, to share it with people. So whenever I talk, whether we're doing a square on, the golden child versus the black sheep, or we are doing a satsang or a guided meditation or whatever, I'm always bringing in this energy because I'm sitting in it. I'm part of it. And those of us that have been guided to do this work are, it's like this is for everybody on the planet to be able to connect their central channel, their Shishimna, with Gaia's Shishimna. Because as she told us, this is another thing that happened along this meridian in 2010. There was this amazing channeled message from Gaia where she said, look, I'm moving into another dimension. And you can come with me if you want to. I'll help you get there. But, she said, you have to give up your secular life. And she wasn't saying, give up your kids and your jobs and all of that. She was saying, give up your secular orientation and recognize that your life is sacred and all that you do is a sacred action. Align your awareness with that sacredness. I have, I've shared this with people in the past. I have a transcript of the channeling, but that's essentially what she was saying. And so I think those of us
so
that
incredibly powerful.
Yeah. So it's like she, her ascension into, she's a being, she's a divine being. This planet is a live being, and she wants to bring all of those who want to along with her. But it's just like any ascension process. There's a lot of stuff, let's say, that comes up, and you have to deal with it. And that's kind of what's going on the planet right now. Yeah.
Yes.
So
it's as if the power of that energy from the Nilotic Meridian is set up perfectly to help us break through from what I call these fields of limitation, or these programs that we've been sitting in, these slave programs that we've been sitting in for so many eons. And that one, the use of energy, the false use of energy, where we just are doing stuff without thinking, without reverence, without sacredness. When you step out of that field of limitation and into this energy of sacredness, it brings you into the web of life, this connection with the planet and everything on it that expands your consciousness. And the melodic meridian literally allows that energy to just completely dissolve all that limitation and bring you into connection. And it is a way of being in consciousness. It is beyond even unity consciousness with other humans. You're unifying your consciousness with the earth. And there it is, just available, and of course moving through you now for all of us, which is a precious gift.
Well, it's my honor and my pleasure, believe me. Believe me, it's pretty amazing here, yeah. And just little side benefits like being able to drive for an hour and go into the Kruger Park and run into all kinds of elephants and giraffes.
And
all these amazing, iconic animals, and their consciousness. I mean, one of the things that hit me the hardest, let's say, when I was first in this part of the world was the dream time, the animal dream time, the African animal dream time consciousness. That's very powerful, too, because there are more animals than humans around here. So their consciousness is much more prevalent. And their consciousness is vast. Their consciousness is very, they have a different relationship with Gaia. You could say they have a closer relationship with Gaia. So that's also another very cool aspect about being here.
No doubt. And, you are an expert at the energetics of Egypt. And like you said, we will continue to build on our knowledge and wisdom about what has happened there. But energetically, it's there. We don't have to go use a bunch of sonic whatever to go find stuff.
Right. Well, somebody like you, you already have all the
both
equipment.
I mean, to do the quantum and the physical.
Yeah.
Yes, you're right. Exactly.
You're seeing
the
capacity. But your seeing capacity allows you to see things like that very clearly. But anybody who is drawn will feel the power. Somebody like you, a world-class seer, will see things visually that you can share. I mean, I wouldn't put myself in that category, but I certainly get the downloads energetically, and the information comes through in various and sundry ways. But I'd love to go with you sometime. I'd love to have you there.
Oh, no doubt. Oh, yeah. We're going to go.
Someday,
That's my hope. That's my plan, is to one day be able to do retreats at that level. And speaking of retreats, that leads us a little bit into a very special, I hinted at it in my email, that you have something really special to share with people that's not going to be necessarily as easy to do in the future as it is now, which is why we wanted to do this call now instead of later.
Yeah.
So would you open that up for everyone?
Well, very briefly, and then maybe we'll also take questions. But so through various circumstances, which I won't go into, I ended up having a retreat scheduled for a smallish group. It has to be a smallish group because of, primarily because we spend 7 nights living, 7 days and nights, living on an exquisite vessel called the Afandina. It's Dahabaya, or Dahabaya, however we want to pronounce it, which only sleeps a certain number of people. And it is designed to look like what the ancient sailing vessels that the pharaohs used were. And it's like a 5-star floating hotel, and you sleep on the Nile every night for 7 nights. And we sail from site to site. So this particular trip, we are it's October 16th to the 27th, 28th. And we start in Giza, or in Cairo rather, and go to the museum and spend like 2 days in Cairo. Then we fly down to Aswan, board the Afandina, and then the first thing we do, because it's quite close to Aswan, is we have a pre-dawn ceremony at the Isis temple at Philae. And we pay big bucks in order to have a private visit. So there are no other tourists there. We show up when it's still dark. We process into the Holy of Holies, and we come out, and it's dawn. And the only other people there are some of the Egyptian guards. And then you feel the whole energy shift after we have 2 hours. At the end of the 2 hours, you can feel when the rest of the tourists start coming, which is not that there is anything wrong with them, but there is something so spectacular when you have it to yourself. And we also have that, actually, I forgot to mention, when we're in Cairo, the very first thing we do is, besides we do go to the museum, but we also have another pre-dawn ceremony that we also hire out for a private visit between the paws of the Sphinx, just like we were talking about earlier. So there's nobody else, no tourists around. It's just our little group with our Egyptologist and a few of the guards and people like that. And we have the opportunity to do an initiatory visit between the paws of the Sphinx. And it's just amazing. And we also go to Saqqara when we're in those first couple of days when we're in Cairo, which has, the first couple of times I had been there, first 3 or 4 times I was in Egypt, I had never been able to go into a site that was only reopened in 2012. It's called the Serapeum. And the story is that the Serapeum has these great big granite laser-cut tombs, right? Tombs for the Apis bulls. That the Apis bull was the sacred bull that whoever the current pharaoh was had to outrun at Saqqara. Now, this is all story, right? Fantasy as far as I'm concerned. Because when I first walked in there, I was like, oh my God, this is a beam me up, beam me down Scotty place. These are not tombs for bulls. Maybe they were used for that at some point. These are technology. This is ancient technology. And then I found out later, much later, that there was a show on Ancient Aliens where they said the very same thing. I'd never heard it from Ancient Aliens. That was just my experience when I went in there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, we basically then, once we have boarded the Afandina, we go from site to site up to Luxor, and then we end up, and I don't need to mention all the things we do, it's all on my website. The trip is called Dreaming Egypt, an immersion in the, I forget, ancient with mysteries or something like that. And but Dreaming Egypt is what I called this. And it's really interesting because I realize the way to describe it is it's this very carefully curated trip where every single experience has been designed to be an initiation, an awakening to your cellular level knowledge of all of this stuff. Because my friend Jane Bell, who I've always, up until now, I've always gone to Egypt with her. She and her friends, Mohammed Nazmi and Emil, forgetting his last name, but I always just think of him as Emil, of Quest Travel, have over the years refined this journey to really be what people like ourselves, awakening beings who are here for the purpose of reclaiming the sacred wisdom through initiation. It's like they've been doing these trips for 25 years and they've really refined it to this very specific it's just perfectly, impeccably curated is what I would say. And so I feel very fortunate to have the opportunity to offer this. Unfortunately, the reason that I don't know what it will be like in the future, because Mohammed Nazmi, who's the person who started Quest Travel, is kind of hovering between this world and the next right now. And he has a lovely young son and daughter who have taken over the business. But it's like, ever since the first time I went in 1999, every time I've gone to Egypt, I have felt that I was held by this beautiful man, this amazing, heart-centered man, Mohammed Nazmi. And he actually he was still functioning and still working. He'd had one stroke several years ago, but he'd recuperated, and he was working when we first envisioned this trip for next October. But he had another massive stroke, and he's not really going to be able to do this ever again anymore. So it will be different. But to me, this is, it's the end of an era for me. And that's why I knew I had to offer this trip, even if, no matter what, I had to offer this trip. And it's, it's filling up quickly. Just in the last week, it started like boom, 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 filling up. But it's, we still have a few spaces, and it's going to be quite special. I don't know that Emil, he's a little older too now. He's amazing. He's like a real Egyptologist. He grew up. That's what he did. He grew up in Luxor, and he knows those temples. He knows the Valley of the Kings and Queens. He knows those places from his childhood. He walked. There's this. Oh, I won't go into too much detail, but he's also psychic. He's a really powerful seer. So, he's his view on things you will not find from anybody else. And he's like a favorite of people like Greg Braden and, John Anthony West. Well, he's not around anymore, but they all would offer their trips through Quest, except they would have bigger trips. So they couldn't have people on the Offendina. They would have to use those great big cruise boats. And so, I'm keeping it. I can't go above a certain number, like a dozen, like 12 people, in order to have us live on the Offendina and sleep on the Nile, which is amazing. The Nile is a very sacred, very special river. Yeah.
So if you want complete and total transformation and get your mind blown a little bit this year, it sounds like it's magnificent. I mean, thank you for bringing through the story piece for us too and giving us a taste of the energy of that.
Yeah. Well, and then I should also add, Elizabeth, that we are also, like, right a week after this trip ends, I'm offering a trip, a journey down here at the base of the Nilotic Meridian, or the Dantian belly of the Nilotic Meridian, with my friend Sarah Neese. We are offering it's a journey. We're calling it Initiation Africa, where we are spending time, in the Kruger Park and at Amazi Sikazi and with the White Lions, spending 2 nights there, and here at the Bladder River Canyon. So both ends of the Nilotic Meridian are going to be, are going to be available for those who can get in there in time.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm just thrilled for anyone who gets to join you, and especially being able to feel the transformation of that energy.
And also, didn't you tell me, you might as well tell people now, Elizabeth, you're planning to do this in the future.
It's true. It's true. I have been tasked by Rama to go. I had a vision last year, and some of you might know I was Lucia's assistant for a long time, and now very close friends. And something I learned the last time I was with her this past April is that I was actually there in Egypt. I was actually her apprentice when all the crazy stuff in Egypt happened. And I remember now that whole life. Little pieces came through since then, and I remember Rama, and I remember witnessing a lot. And that was fabulous, because remembrance is part of our inheritance. So it is something very fantastic to be able to remember a greater story beyond yourself and your own identity in this life. But I was tasked by Rama, who I've never met in person. I've only had him come to me in dreams or visions, and he wanted me to go to 9 places on the planet. And he wants me to do what I would call quantum archaeology, to go in and give people a psychic guided tour of what I'm seeing and move into the depths of the information that's stored there. So although Lucia always, reminds me, seeing is not the most important or best skill set. It is very handy, but it's my responsibility to share what I see. That's what where the importance lies. And so with my skill set in its peak, I'm intending to go to these places, and one of them is Egypt. But literally, it's almost 11 years of retreats have already been planned out, basically.
Wow.
So if you want to hang out with me for 11 years, I'll be around. But Egypt will be one of them one of these days.
Yeah. No, I think it would be amazing. I would love to go there with you. I'll help you set it up for sure.
Oh, yeah, we're going to do it, and we're going to be in Africa discovering the depths of that wisdom. And, I wanted to also mention, you brought up the inner world. I used to not believe that stuff either.
Me too.
Just like I used to not believe in reincarnation. But then all the evidence, the evidence just, blew me out of the water. Well, the discovery a couple years ago of the fact that there is a gigantic structure of rock called ringwoodite underneath the mantle of the Earth, which holds 3 times as much water as the surface of the planet.
Right.
the discovery of this structure was like, well, there we go. Never mind. Totally possible.
Yeah.
So, sometimes science gives us a clue into the fact that these things are not just stories, and most anthropologists would agree that when you're doing good anthropology, you're talking to the locals and you're listening to the stories, and that's how they find all this crazy stuff, is they listen to the stories. That's right. Where we know the facts come from. So yeah, it's when human beings pass down information in many ways, and stories is one of them. But so I hope that your retreats this fall, early winter, will fill up, and that those folks will get to that precious journey. Good. I'm so glad.
Yeah. I'm very, I think I'll just share a very brief story, and then we've gone over an hour, and
it's okay. My conversations often go over, and yes, let's definitely take questions.
Okay.
Please do share your story, and we'll get
just
questions.
One little thing, and it's not that big of a deal, and everybody's going to go, oh yeah, of course, but I had a little aha here. I originally planned this trip with my friend Jane, and for the longest time we only had one person who had signed up, and then she's a new grandmother, and so her daughter needed some support in October, and she said, well, since we only have one person, the retreat's probably not going to happen, so I think, but you can do it if you want to. I mean, she was very nice about it, but that's essentially what she was saying. And so I sort of I changed the name to, I kind of reformatted the trip to be what my trip would be, with what my energy would say about it. Kind of like you were saying, Elizabeth, that the responsibility with your seeing is to share that with people. And that's the way it is with me. My responsibility with having access and knowledge and experience with these energies, the energy of this meridian at the at these two spots, is to share it. Otherwise, it would turn in on itself and actually be harmful to me instead of helpful. That's what I was told by a South American shaman when I did a rose ceremony at one point. I mean, he didn't know, but he just said, you have all this wisdom, but if you don't share it, it's not going to be good for you. So anyway, so I thought I really wanted to share Dreaming Egypt, and for the longest time there were just 3 people signed up, and I was like, gosh, I can't afford to have to, am I going to have to cancel? And I really kind of broke my heart over it for a while, but I kept getting, no, you really have to do it. And a friend of mine, good seer, said, she sort of challenged me. This was not that long ago. She said, V, why do you think nobody has signed up? Or you've only got 3 signups? And I said, I don't know. And I said, I just know I have to go. And she said, well, there's your answer. You have to go. You've got to go. Even if nobody else is with you, you've got to go. And it was like a light bulb went on, and I went, yeah, right. I mean, I can't lead a trip for 3 people, so I'll just give all those people their money back, and, but I'm going. And within days, the sign-ups started coming in. I mean, it's like it's like been less than a week, and it's more. The number has more than doubled, and I at the moment I'm beginning to feel like, oh well, I don't know how many more people I can take. But it took me kind of shifting just that subtle amount, and then all of a sudden, it was like energetically, it was like, okay. It's like what, I thought, oh, I guess this is a little bit like Leslie in 1999. I just have to be there. And then the people who are supposed to be there with me will come. And then...
Exactly.
Happens.
Yeah, that's what Rama told me long ago, too. He said, build it and they will come.
There's a whole movie about that. Have you ever seen that movie? It's called Field of Dreams. If you build it,
Field
they
of
will
Dreams.
come. Yeah. This
is a great lesson for all of us in trying to align with our bliss.
Yeah.
And I remember Joseph Campbell saying, when you align with your bliss and you try to use your head, you try to use your brain mind, it's not going to help you out. It's your heart and your gut that will align with you and listen to those other brains. Listen to your heart mind and your gut mind and listen to the deeper reason of why you might do something. Take the risk. Take the risk.
Yeah.
You're called to do something big. Do it.
Yeah. I mean, you just reminded me of something. It's like recently I have really been shown how the heart brain, the parasympathetic nervous system, and the emotional body is a whole system.
Yeah. It's its own thing.
It's
very, very
it's a
powerful.
whole system. Yeah. Oh well, okay. I hope I haven't put people to sleep.
The energy's good. I'm sure there might be some. I'm never surprised people say, "Oh my gosh, I keep falling asleep every time I listen." It happens when a lot of energy is moving through.
That's
so, my
true.
friends, if you'd like to talk to us live, you can press *2, or you can type in a question via the Q&A box. And very happy to serve you on that. One question came through. Someone wanted to know the names of the books again, Victoria. Mm-hmm. Would you repeat those? I know it's Initiation.
Yes. Actually, there are 3 books. I only mentioned 2, but I'm going to give you 3 books because these are my favorite books. Okay. Initiation by Elizabeth H. And actually, she spells Elizabeth with an S and not a Z. So it's Elisabeth. And her last name is H, Haich. And the book is still available. The other book, the second book I had mentioned, was a book called Winged Pharaoh, and the author is Joan E. Grant. And she's no longer alive, neither is Elizabeth H. She wrote her book like in the 50s or 60s, Elizabeth H. No, I think Joan E. Grant probably wrote her book even earlier. But she was amazing. She would have what she calls far memory. Her books, she has several that she calls the far memory books. And she writes with absolute memory. And again, it's this beautiful, wonderful story, but there are spiritual truths that are just so spot on and universal and insightful that she just shares from the story of this daughter of Pharaoh who was a priestess. And in her case, she and her brother were Pharaoh together. And that's so it's Winged Pharaoh. And then the other book, which I always read, I always have this book next to me, and we read from it when we're in Egypt. Beautiful book called Awakening Osiris, the Egyptian Book of the Dead by Norman D. Ellis. And, Egyptian hieroglyphs and Egyptian information is very open to I don't know how to interpretation. Yeah, personal filters. I was thinking. Normandy Ellis is just a very beautiful mystic. I actually don't know her personally, but my friend who has been doing these trips for 25 years is very close friends with her. And this book, she actually describes how she wrote this book in another book called Dreams of Isis. But this book has the most beautiful pieces. In fact, rather than doing a meditation, if we have time, I would just like to read one little piece because it's
yes, that'll be a good ending.
Poetry is so exquisite. Yeah, Awakening Osiris by Normandy Ellis. Another must-read for anybody who is fascinated by Egypt. Okay. So
I have to say, I did buy the book Initiation, and the minute it entered into my house, there was just incredible power. And my husband picked up the box and he brought it in. And he's like, "What did you order?" he's not always that sensitive, but he is in his own way. He is with like animals and nature, but he's like, "What did you order?" And I said, "Oh, I ordered this book that Victoria Moore told me I should get." And I opened it and I brought it out, and his eyes got really big.
Oh no!
The power that is woven into this book is unbelievable. And it's next to my desk because I'm working on having time to read such things. But the energy and power is palpable. It has a field to it, no doubt.
Yeah, I think Elizabeth H. became what you could call enlightened when she was around.
Yeah.
She ended up taking students. I think she lived in Switzerland because she couldn't go back to Hungary at that point. Hungary was on the other side of the Iron Curtain and all that. But I think she was quite an accomplished and beautiful mystic. So probably her energy is coming off that book.
No doubt. That's fantastic. If she was alive, I'd have her on the show. So we do have one question, one that you can answer better than I, because my experiences have been very mystical and not so physical. But there is a question. I'm wondering a little bit more about Rama. I don't know that everyone here knows very much about him and who he was and why he keeps coming up in our stories.
Well, Rama, Dr. Frederick Lenz, was a spiritual teacher that Lucia Renee, who was your mentor and very good friend, who now thinks of you, Elizabeth, as the go-to seer in her life. Lucia and I were both students of his, and my friend Leslie Temple Thurston, who you might have heard of as the author of the Marriage of Spirit book, another very powerful female spiritual teacher, enlightened teacher, who's just recently retired. Leslie was also a student of his and various friends of ours. And he was I always think of him as my mystical teacher, though he exposed everybody to a very firm background in Hinduism, Buddhism, Tibetan Buddhism, Zen, and mysticism, primarily, I guess you could say, those approaches to spirituality. But both Lucia and I had meditated for many years and Leslie as well, before we studied with Rama, but we had been in a more Indian-oriented tradition, the Transcendental Meditation movement. So I was with him for many years, and as was Lucia. And Leslie was only with him for a couple of years before her guides moved her on into doing her own cave experience. And she had also, at the time she was studying with him, she had a friend, a mentor, who was a Jungian astrologer. So she was both getting Rama's teachings that were very mystical and very spiritual, and he included a lot of the traditional information. But at the same time, she was working with a Jungian and the conscious and the unconscious. And that's how she came up with a body of work known as this Marriage of Spirit work, which is very powerful for clarifying and clearing egoic limitations, getting rid of the ideas, the limited and limiting ideas in the subconscious and bringing the unconscious into consciousness, which Rama used to also talk about that. He talked a lot about Tantra being the reconciliation of opposites, and the pairs of opposites in duality. But he didn't really get into the kind of deep emotional processing that I work with, and that Lucia works with, and that Leslie worked with. What else can I say about it? Okay, so the other thing, if you want to hear about Rama, you should read Lucia's book, Unplugging the Patriarchy. She brings in quite a bit about him. But the story that you might be thinking about is that he was a spiritual or mystical teacher in many lives, and one of them was in Egypt. That among many.
And if you'd all like to listen to some of his talks, most of his talks that he recorded are free at ramatalks.com.
Yeah.
He has a great power voice. He brings through he was a really great teacher.
He was, yeah. He was.
As are you.
And you. Yeah.
Oh, thank you. That's a huge compliment. So, friends, still, if you'd like to chat with us live, if you have anything coming up that's unfolding, where are you at? And how has this discussion around the ancientness of our history opened anything up for you right now? We're curious to know. And you can press star 2 if you're on the call, or you can go ahead and type in. Someone would like to know, what is the exact link to go see what's up with your retreat?
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay. My website is Emanation of Presence. That's one word. EMANATIONOFPRESENCE.org. Or you can also look me up, Victoria Moore. Moore is spelled with one O. .org. And under under offerings, you'll see retreats, and you'll see Dreaming Egypt, and there is a description of the trip and an itinerary and the pricing and an online application. So, you can go to Emanation of Presence or Victoria Moore. Both are .org, not .com, but .org.
Oh, excellent. Yes, very good. I think we blew all their socks off, Victoria. Not a lot of questions coming through. Irene has an interesting question, and I feel I can answer you, Irene. She's been experiencing multidimensionalities throughout her whole life, and it sounds like her question is mainly about her skill set, because she has a hard time putting it in words. And she says that her energy work is mostly based in feelings, and she feels like it's time to step up. I think a lot of people are being called out of the woodwork.
Yes, I agree.
And it's time. We're here ready to pull this big, gigantic gate open to the next golden age, and that's what we're doing right now. We're pulling this gate open. And so she's wondering, how does she put her work into words? Where does she start? And, Irene, when I'm looking into that energy, your skill set is what I would call sacred sitting. And it's something that many spiritual teachers do, but if someone is called to do sacred sitting as a kind of work, you're moving out of the way. You're allowing your identity to dissolve, so that the field that you're maintaining in the 3D that's coming through from all of those dimensions, that field can help dissolve blockages, dissolve difficult issues, help people to be able to move through big pieces for transformation. We're very called at this point to not do traditional healing the same way we've been doing. And I've, over the past few months, witnessed my own warrior healer and oracle self, these skill sets dissolve away, which made me wonder, well, how do I do sessions now? Because I'm used to going in and, removing implants and, chasing demons off and all kinds of doing. And so the answer is it's time for dissolving. And the light from the 12 dimensions, and of course Source direct in the 13th dimension, that the light from all of that is able to dissolve away and help people do it on their own. And that's so important.
Absolutely.
It's so much more important for people to be able to take that responsibility now than ever, because it is the individual's responsibility, clarity, dissolving of ego, dissolving of identity, dissolving even into the depths of oneness, their own skill sets. It's that power that we're all being called to bring through, and that's what's going to mark the golden age, is when people look at one another and they say, in the ancient terms, I greet the god or goddess, I greet the soul within you. To be able to see that, to perceive it, to feel it, means that we have to dissolve everything that's in the way of all that light. So you're talking about that as a way of helping others reach that potential. So I hope that helps to put it into words, because we are at the time now where the 12 dimensions are available, not just the 5th dimension, not just the angels, but all of them. And they're all here, and all of the beings are available here. All the great cat beings, that the architects, they're here. Many of their family members are here. And all of the beings that have been our allies for millennia, hundreds and thousands of years, are here too. And the Earth is now taking her throne seat back in the galactic community, and it's fantastic. So it's a special time, and a very extra special time, to go to holy places, to sacred places such as the Nilotic Meridian, Egypt, and of course where you're at, Victoria. Mm-hmm. So, well, Linda wants to know more about what is sacred sitting. I made that up. as a way to describe what I see when I'm doing sessions. I can see people's skill sets, and I see sometimes that people have this ability to do that. And so I made it up as a term to help people. Since it's come up, because it's come up multiple times, I'll put it on my list to do a YouTube video about skill sets.
Yeah.
And we'll talk more about that.
Yeah, it's interesting, because that also describes what I see. I mean, I feel like what I do is I hold space for people. Yeah. I'm like not a placeholder, I'm a space holder. And that is really, I think you're absolutely spot on, Elizabeth. At this point in time, it's really about how you can be present in a way that enables others to find that within themselves. The old teaching paradigm is so over. I mean, and we all perceive differently. I mean, that's what I feel like. I feel like, somehow over the last 6-8 years, I've been cut free to, I went through an awakening that then allowed me to just start really opening up to seeing what's really available. And it's so fascinating, and it's so exciting. So being that, and sacred sitting as a way of energetically holding space that encourages the other, whoever you're with, to, go boldly where you've never gone before. so to speak.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And what happens too, I'm sure you can attest to this, when someone's in a field like Victoria's or Lucia's, people who are bringing through incredible amounts of energy from certain places, when someone's in that field, the problems that we bring to the table, the blockages that we're trying to identify, the way it works is not that the person who's holding that field explains to you what the next steps are, what you need to do, anything like that. Instead, it's a very purely energetic method of allowing all that source light, all that powerful transformational light, because everything's made of light, to move through and unfold those steps and those practical pieces for you within yourself.
Right.
So instead of someone telling you what those practical pieces are, then you get to discover it on your own. And that's more valuable. That's much more valuable.
That's self-discovery with a capital S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes. And to discover the self, which is actually that ray of light coming directly from source. And that's a unique ray of light. Just, I like to say, you're unique just like everybody else. And that unique ray of light is true. It's true. It's truth. And that ray of light has its own perspective, which is what makes this universe so fantastic. Because every living being is its own perspective directly from source. That's what the experiment on this that made this universe is based on. So that means when people get into a group and they're doing some kind of, discovery, some big event like a solstice or an equinox, and they get into a group and they're seeing stuff and they're perceiving stuff, everybody's going to see it and perceive it differently. And it's perfectly fine that way. It's exactly the way it should be that way. And then you get to see like puzzle pieces, giving you a more greater, broader picture of light whenever you do that kind of work in collaboration with others. So one of the things we're all being called to do now is collaborate. And that's another way that the new earth will be built. Just being built upon collaboration and enjoying the differences that we have, enjoying the fact that many people make a greater whole, a greater perspective, a more powerful beam of light is where many people come together with that sacred honoring of one another's perspective and their histories. And then you get a fuller, more powerful, magnified way of functioning, of doing things. And we've forgotten how to do that, and so many people are trying to reteach or help the planet do it again. And journeys like retreats can help us do that, can help us make those connections. So if you're called to do that, if you're feeling the pull, go for it. Take the jump, because it's part of how we're going to be able to get to the next big, huge pieces for ourselves and for, of course, the whole planet. I want to give a little bit of a glimpse of what I see. I don't normally see the future very much. I have been given incredible glimpses occasionally, and one of them is that in the far future, I don't know when, that's not important, but when we do finally pull this gate open to the golden age, there will be a great rebuilding of the planet in harmony with the earth. And from there, then we will get to be, all of us will get to be emissaries of peace and harmony with in this whole galaxy and galaxies beyond. And that is that's our true future, that we get to be emissaries beyond this planet for peace, because we've been in a great long bondage and slavery, one of the longest in the galaxy, We've been in slavery for at least 300 to 400,000 years, an energetic slavery. And being able to step out of that and say, we know, just like many other races have faced those sorts of energies, whatever that looked like for their histories, well, we'll get to be able to do that too, and perhaps help other planets and other places come into peace and prosperity and collaboration. And we'll know how to do it because we had to do it in the hardest way. We had to do it in a place of forgetting. We had to do it in a place of mental energetic bondage, of programming. We had to come out of that. Each of us will have to do that work and step out of those fields of limitation. And when we do so for all posterity. We do so for all of our next lifetimes. So it is truly a real and actual shift. It is time now for all of this to be unfolding, and that's why everyone's being called to step up. As our friend just said, I feel like I'm being called to take the next step up. Yeah, definitely. That's why. It's the time for that now, and never a better time. We'll see if anyone has more questions. That's my blurb about that. Yes, great. So, good. People say that was very validating. And Yumna says, thank you for the interesting chat. I was actually reading about Hollow Earth before this, and I've always been drawn to Egypt, and the Initiation is definitely an amazing read. So that's coming through for everyone to grab that book and see about how that might affect your life. So we don't have anybody raising hands yet. We're still open for questions if you all like, and just for one more moment, and then we're going to have Victoria read to us. Instead of a meditation, we'll get to have a really special energy read from the book, her favorite third book, which was called what again, Victoria?
Awakening Osiris.
Perfect. So I'm just refreshing our Q&A here to see if anything else. Good. I think we just gave them a whole lot to chew on. That's okay. Let's go into this special reading. Which part of the book will you bring through for us?
I was kind of trying to think of. I think I'm going to read my favorite, and I have to let me just shift my mic a little bit so I can. This is in the light. It's pitch dark now, you know. It's It's very late at night here, right? Okay, so you might want to close your eyes. This is my favorite. It's called Becoming the Lotus. As if I'd slept 1,000 years underwater, I wake into a new season. I am the blue lotus rising. I am the cup of dreams and memory opening. I, the 1,000-petaled flower. At dawn, the sun rises naked and new as a babe. I open myself and am entered by light. This is the joy, the slow awakening into fire as one by one the petals open, as the fingers that held tight the secret unfurl. I let go of the past and release the fragrance of flowers. I open and light descends, fills me and passes through, each thin blue petal reflected perfectly in clear water. I am that lotus filled with light, reflected in the world. I float content within myself, one flower with 1,000 petals, one life lived 1,000 years without haste. One universe sparking 1,000 stars, one God alive in 1,000 people. If you stood on a summer's morning on the bank under a brilliant sky, you would see the 1,000 petals and say that together they make the lotus. But if you lived in its heart, invisible from without, you might see how the ecstasy at its fragrant core gives rise to its 1,000 petals. What is beautiful is always that which is itself in essence a certainty of being. I marvel at myself and the things of earth. I float among the days in peace, content, not part of the world. The world is all the parts of me. I open toward light and lift myself to the gods on the perfume of prayer. I ask for nothing beyond myself. I own everything I need. I am content in the company of God, a prayer that contains its own answer. I am the lotus. As if from a dream, I wake up laughing.
Beautiful. Thanks for helping us feel so content today, Victoria.
You're most welcome. Thank you. It's always lovely whenever we get together. So it was nice this time to share it with others.
Yes, I'm so in deep appreciation for your field and your precious work.
Oh, thank you. Same for me with you.
Well, all of us are just, I think, in that energy. So, my friends, enjoy the transformative energy today or this evening for you and whomever might listen to the recording. That will also be held in that too. And it will always be free and available for you to share on my website. And you can find that again at seerandScientist.com and then go to New Earth Conversations there on the little side menu. Good. So, my friends, thank you for joining us, and I will let us go ahead and enjoy that beautiful, energetic, and quiet silence. And namaste to you, Victoria.
Deep bow. Much love. Namaste.
Goodbye, my friends. Have a wonderful day.